Okay, roll call please. Let's call this meeting to order.
We got our calculator.
Chair Rennie.
Here.
Director Abikova.
Here.
Director Sinks. Here. Director Miller.
Here.
Director Gibbons.
Here.
And I'll note that Vice Chair Harney is absent today.
Okay, so first item is public comment for things not on the agenda. Would any members of the public like to address us for things not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll close that public comment and move on to consent calendar.
Can I just say I like your public comments? I always learn something, so sorry.
So you want them to do it more often?
I'm just saying.
This
This is like the most informed public comment in any meeting I've ever been in.
That's true. That's true. So consent calendar, we have only to approve the minutes from last executive committee meeting. Does anybody have any changes or questions for the minutes?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passes unanimously. Moving on to regular calendar, which is Silicon Valley Clean Energy Policy Shift. Should be exciting. Staff, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you do recall, back in June and July of last year, we recommended a bunch of policies in order to guide the development of the program. Most notable of those policies were something like the enrollment. We said we're going to enroll in 3 phases. Later on, we revised that and made 2 phases. That policies now is pretty much concluded. Another one that's also concluded was how to fund the line of credit or the money that we needed to borrow in order to deal with the negative cash flow in the first couple of months of operation. Initially, we recommended that we bring those funds from the members, and later on, we got a pretty decent deal from River City Bank that got us to do away with that approach, and that is another policy that now is concluded. There are a number of other issues that we have decided on, then later on made certain revisions to them, and we still have them somewhat open. And I'm going to go through one at a time. Probably the top one is, and the most important is the rate design. Initially, we said we would like to set our rates to be 1% below that of PG&E, have that be set for 2017 and 18. Then comes 2019, we'll approach rate design as most utilities do, which is you calculate the cost of service, you allocate that cost of service for customer classes, and then you decide on what the rates will be for each customer class. We've been thinking about what would be an appropriate revisions to that policy, and we came up with another idea that we think probably would be workable and would make more sense given the business that we're in, and that is to set our rates at somewhere between 1 to 3% lower than PG&E, knowing that at this point for 2017, we know that we're going to end up roughly with about 30% net operating margin. So we figure we'll probably set the rates at about somewhere around 1 to 3% below PG&E. Then decide on all of the operating expenses, including the power supply, and at the end of the year, see how much money we have left, and give that money back as dividends to the customers. And we recommended that for a number of reasons. One, that the certainty of the supply resources is not like the certainty that you're accustomed to in the cities that you at this point govern. The deviation is likely to be large, and it would be best not to decide ahead of time how much the cost of service is going to be, but wait until the end of the year when we are certain what the cost is going to be able to find out what that delta is that we can give back to the customers. We think also giving the money back to the customers as dividends we'll have them be part of this organization as owners. They will think of themselves as owners, and they are.
Very clever.
If you give it to them 1% of the time or a number of percentages of time, month in and month out, likely they're not going to see the difference, and they may even attribute that to PG&E and not us. But if you come at the end of the year and you hand them that money, you basically say, thank you, you are our owner, and therefore you deserve a dividend from the investment that you made in this organization. We think
Presumably
this,
proportional to what they'd actually paid, right?
exactly.
You don't want people
Exactly.
tricking us by switching.
No, it will not. It will be calculated based on how much money they put in for the entire year, and we think when you get, since our year starts October and ends at the end of September, it will take us another month and a half, roughly, to balance all the dollars and cents and actual dollars and cents, which will get us somewhere around mid-November, and
Christmas.
December is
Right before the holidays.
What happens
Get
to
a
those
check,
solar
that's
customers
awesome.
that are getting a check back? Are you going to ask us to send money in?
well, we're just going to tell the solar customer you get plenty already. So
Based on what he put in, right?
yeah, we'll ask
It'd be
them to
zero.
No, that was my fear was, or if you just did the straight math, that I would be negative because you'd be asking me to check.
Oh no,
no.
yeah, that won't be the case. And we'll work out all the fine details of what we do with various customer classes. But we think this, and also the last thing is this will kind of keep the customer sort of close to us, and in anticipation of money coming at the end of the year, they most likely don't want to opt out.
So how much are we talking?
How much? You mean dollars?
I'm thinking more percentage of.
Well,
if I have a bill, does that extra money in December cover half of my December bill, a quarter of my December bill?
Well, then it should be more than that. If we assume that 2018 and beyond would be, I would say as close to, but let's say close enough to 2017. 2017 we end up with net operating revenue of about 30%. And let's say 2018 and beyond it would be less than that. Let's say it's going to be 20%, 15%. 15% is it constitutes more than
Of their
a
annual
month and a half.
spend?
Yeah, it'll be more than a month and a half of their monthly spend.
Oh my
So
God.
if you're spending $100 on it, not you, because you got the solar rooftop, but if you're spending $100 on your electricity, then we're looking at $150, maybe $200.
So you get
And if
to
you spend 40, you get 60.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point is, you get to December and your electricity is essentially free.
Plus.
Yeah, in some cases it may be December and part of January.
December is a low electricity month.
Yeah, so most likely you'll have a couple of months worth of free electricity.
So that would be a credit on the bill rather than a hard check.
I will
Yeah.
definitely put all the details together and make sure that it would be probably nicer that it would be a check, kind of like what you get from REI. It's nice to have that couple $100 check that you can go buy really more expensive stuff with. On the other hand, you're writing a check and sending it to 250,000 customers may
It's too
not be cheap, and so it may be a better idea to have it as a credit. How would that work with the folks at the?
A bigger impact if it comes as a check.
Yeah.
Exactly, you
I
get a
think
better
it's super
impact, but it's
clever. The whole idea is just super clever. The only thing I wonder about is, it's kind of like if I'm over withheld on my taxes, I feel like I've given you, the federal government, or in this case, SVCE, too much, so why aren't you just charging less, right? And you need to have a grumpy
No, I'm
old-
assuming the check comes with the whole explanation.
This guy named Jay in my city would be...
there's the J's and the Dicks and the Bobs.
Why is it all grumpy old white guys all the time?
I didn't say that.
Oh, I did.
No, but
You
you
should
would
see
get-
the email I got last night.
But you
No,
would get a
seriously.
letter with it that said, hey, you'd say,
I
You
looked
know,
them up.
2.5% all year long.
Born 1950.
Because
Republican.
this is a public
Hasn't
organization.
voted
Here's
since
your share.
2000.
Yeah, my advice is, I can assure you, there will be all the J's and the likes will come back and say, you have stuffed my money, you overcharged me, and you
Yeah.
think I'm supposed to be grateful. There will be that 1%. I guarantee you there will be that 1%. But the other 99%
Will love us.
Yeah, a whole lot better. Yeah.
And we just probably have to be careful that we're not really over collecting. I mean, we got to be thoughtful about how much uncertainty, right? If there was little uncertainty, presumably the dividend would be little. If there's a high level of uncertainty, as there may be the next 2-3 years, and you could justify a higher
It just
dividend.
shows prudent management.
Yeah.
And you don't want to have a dividend that's $1.50. You know, then it just looks really dumb.
Yeah.
It should be enough to look like a bill. That was
Now,
kind of where I was.
Don't want to have.
the other thought was, the other option that we can adopt is basically is to say, I'm going to charge you precisely every rate schedule is going to be exactly like PG&E. So you'll know that this is what you would have paid if you decided not to partner with me and instead stay with PG&E. And then anything that comes in as dividends is plain. That's your contribution. This is what you get for being a founder and a partner and a shareholder in this organization. Yeah.
Tom, can I ask a question here?
Yes.
So in your third paragraph, you say one way to do it is to allocate the cost amongst customer classes and design rates that are response to the various special interest groups that actively participate. What do you mean by special interest groups?
Well, generally, this is my experience when you do the standard design, which is allocate the cost of service, then you allocate that cost among the various customer groups. You will have people coming in saying, I think you're allocating more cost to me than you should, and you should allocate more to the KW instead of the KWH. And I've seen it happen year and year again in working for municipal utilities where the allocation to the large customers was a tad more than what it should be in favor of reducing the allocation for the residential customers, because the residential customers voted for the council members, and the council members it needed to kind of be nice back to the residential customers, so they kind of use the influence over the process and over the work that we've done to make sure that the rates for the residential customers were more favorable. And that's what I mean by special interest. There will be people that will come into the council members, to the board members, and say, "Wait a minute, you need to do this, that, or the other thing," and that may influence your decision as to how to allocate that cost and eventually how the rates will be designed. I'm trying to shift away from that and basically say to all of you, to say to all the customers, PG&E spends roughly about, $5 million, maybe more, every year, every couple of years on rate design and on cost of service analysis, and they give the CPUC lots of money so the CPUC can look over their shoulder and make sure that they have allocated these expenses appropriately. Let's just make the assumption that all that money is not gone to waste, and it's money coming out of your pockets eventually, because they use the ratepayers. You're paying your bills, and you pay the rate making is all coming out of your pockets. So let's assume that all that is correct and legitimate, and avoid having to try to design the rates and allocate the cost differently over here, and just use that as our starting point. Then the dividends idea would be
as a starting point, right? Because we could. It seems to me that PG&E has a different goal somewhat than we do. For example, we're trying to be all renewable, or we may be trying to promote more solar. So, we may want to fix the duct curve more than they do. So we may want to design rates even more aggressively than they do to get people to charge EVs during the day or something like that. So I wouldn't want to get stuck just following PG&E because we have a somewhat different goal.
The time of use part we don't control. Even if we wanted to, because we don't have the data, so we can't do that part of it. It's just, what are the actual structures? Liz?
So, I want to say back to you what I read and what you just said. So we've got a third option coming up that you wanted to discuss, right?
Or, yeah.
Okay, so the first discussion you said was we keep the 1 to 3% below PG&E rates. I assume we would set them once a year like we do when PG&E announces their rates in January. We would set it as 1 to 3 below. And then we give a rebate at the end of the year. And the pros and cons of that are people have see the cost reduction, and it's tangible for me to go out and sell. It may be modest, but it's still 1 to 3% below. And when they get the rebate, we get a balance of not having to overcharge them, and they still get a good rate buy-in. We kind of get sort of the best of both worlds. Now what you're proposing is, and I'm not totally clear, sticking with PG&E rates. Are you saying then no longer doing the 1 to 3, or just paralleling the PG&E rates?
No, I'm saying skip the 1 to 3. Just have the exact same rates as PG&E.
Yeah, having exact same rates as
Yeah.
PG&E.
So that's another option.
And that's another option, okay. So I think that's problematic.
Sort of stuff.
It's harder to, I suppose, I mean, maybe everything I'm going to say is coming right back to that point. It is much harder to sell. It's sort of like, why bother for a potential rebate at the end? Assuming they do even get a rebate, and they have no history of getting a rebate, and then it makes the argument that you have taken their money and have used their money for a whole year.
Yeah.
So to me, if that's what I need clarified, if it's just sticking with PG&E, and particularly if PG&E raises their rates in the middle of the year, did we raise our rates in the middle of the year? You know, what is it that we do?
Yeah, I think with that approach, it's pretty much you just you just parallel them all the way. They raise it, they drop it. It doesn't matter what they do. You just ride along with them. Then whatever you have left over at the end of the year. Keep in mind that this, by the way, was the third option on my list.
It's okay. I'm just responding to what I understand. To me, it's problematic also because all I ever read and hear about and get emails about is PG&E is off the wall, up and down, constant change, constant increases, constant everything. And to have us associated with that yo-yo and more money, and yet we give them more money back at the end, they're going to say, why did you bother? So that's my reaction to that one.
What's our current policy? For 1% below PG&E, that was based on January. Are we tracking PG&E this year, or are we going to do a constant rate?
Yeah, the policy that you established is as published in 1/1/2017, we go 1% below that. We stay there until 2018, unless something drastic happens, then we have to come back and revisit.
It will actually be lower than PG&E at certain points because they're getting increases
If
during this time period.
if they have increases, then it will be even more than 1%. But it is possible, and I'm told by the staff, there's one segment of one class that get a reduction recently, whereby that reduction is probably 1.0 something. So now there's one class of something, and now is paying a little bit more than what
Has PG&E
for us.
other than that one class, has PG&E moved its rates since January?
Yeah, they move it once, I understand. On the average, they move the rates about 3 to 4 times a year. That's why I suggested that we go into a 1 to 3%, whereby most likely, to the extent that the numbers hold, I think moving towards the 3 would be the proper approach. So even if we have some adjustments that takes
Just like
PG&E's rates down, then we're still going to be way ahead.
So you're suggesting not follow them?
And now fix it up and just do somewhere between 1 to 3% and stay there for the entire year and wait until next year when they adjust the rates and we'll see what we have to do.
Set it once at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I like that.
Okay.
You like
Let's go.
I like the giving back a dividend part though too.
Oh, yeah.
And I was originally going to say 1% because then you can get a larger check to people, as Howard is saying. If it's $1.50, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the 3% makes sense if it allows us to set it and not move it.
Yeah, stability is good. I mean, I don't know where Mr. Bray is, but it seemed to me like when you went around and talked to the businesses, particularly for them, right, certainty and not having to move it up and down was,
Some of my
had
naysayers.
a lot of value. But can you speak to that? I mean, if we were trying to follow PG&E, how would businesses look at what we're doing? I thought a lot of the value was in being stable. That's what I remember.
For many of them, that's the case. For some of the direct access, for example, we got customers who not only don't want a daily that go PG&E, they actually want to go on the spot marketplaces. They told us, can you
Really?
look into
Kind of the opposite end of the
Sorry, say
spectrum.
that again, please.
There's some of the large members who are direct access now,
Yeah.
so they're not going to be getting power from us. When we talk to them about the stability of having the rates being stable for 2 years, and isn't that a good thing? We like it, which is one of our largest. This is a good thing. We like it. But some other customers said, I have no problem with the spot market prices going up and down. I'll float with that. I get the capital to back me up. This is a very small portion of my cost. And I think I'll realize a lot more savings if I go with the spot market prices. So that's what I want. If you want to have me as a customer, you need to develop some rates that will accommodate my needs. So they come in all different sizes.
So let me let's see if the public wants to comment on number 1, the rate design.
We've got one more to go.
We got a few more.
We talked all of number 1 though, right?
Yeah, I think we have a third option.
We got the power supply mix, the product offerings, and reserve policy.
No, I think we are down to 1. So James, if you want to comment on number 1.
Yes, thanks. James Chalea, Sunnyvale resident. So, to something that Tom said earlier about PG&E's resources going into setting rate design and all that, I can let you know I've seen that. One example is right before I left PG&E. They were looking for people to add to their team that was going to go into the time of use rate setting team for the residential, because they're going to go to a default time of use rate for residential customers in 2019. They picked all the best people for that team. So they're spending a lot of time and energy, and some of their best people working on rate design. I can't say that I know all of their people, but that's one example, and they do spend a lot of time and money on that. So, backing up, I think what staff here is proposing is a very good idea. The one thought I had was, for 2019, as Chair Rennie was saying, that there's a SVCE may want to do interesting things with rates, but I think this proposal makes sense. What you could still do interesting things with rates through rate overlays, like the NEM rate is actually an overlay rate. The demand response smart rate is an overlay, so you can keep all the same rates. You can do interesting things with programs and send price signals through overlay. Essentially, you make some edit to a rate based on, like you did with NEM, on top of the existing rates. So you can follow what PG&E is doing for their rate structures and still have some creativity based on an overlay that is based on and ties into a program that you might design. Another reason that I think that this proposal around 3% and a dividend later, for all the same reasons you were all saying, it's easy to sell, it makes sense, it's community ownership, that all resonates with me. I've done over a dozen community events for you and for PCE, and selling the discount helps a lot. One other thing that comes up relative to that time of use rate change, in 2019 for residential default time of use, that's going to be hard for SVCE to try to manage that on its own. So working closely with PG&E as they do extensive planning for helping all the residential customers understand and get used to and figure out how to deal with that big change. It's probably better that SVCE goes along and partners closely in all those communications and make it easier for the customer, as opposed to if you might set different rates and SVCE may come out looking worse than PG&E. It's going to be a bumpy ride to get through that change.
You're talking about solar.
No, I'm talking about default time of use rates for all residential customers that all the IOUs are going to in January 1, 2019.
Okay.
Knowing what I know about PG&E's past experience with smart meters, these kinds of big changes are really hard for customers to understand. PG&E's also done this with small customers, large customers. They spend a lot of time, energy, effort. It's a major all-hands-on-deck kind of effort, and they're going to start doing that in this fall, is to help try to get residential customers to be ready for these changes in the way that they deal with time of use and even just understand what that is. So going along with them, I think, is probably the best way to go, because you can still always say that you're a little bit better than them the whole way along. Otherwise, you may end up with lumps that they don't get, and they look better than you. And so all in all, I think this is a very good approach for multiple reasons.
So this brings up a question, James, maybe you could answer. If not, maybe our CEO can answer. But it seems like in not very far future, PG&E is no longer going to have the majority of the load to serve. And it's getting smaller and smaller as more CCAs come online. Mm-hmm. It's not going to make much sense for them to keep spending tons of money for rate design. How much longer do we follow them? And what happens when it gets to the point that they don't even bother spending a lot of effort setting rates because they don't have a very big load?
Well, I think in the time frame we're talking about, beginning at, so 2019, 2020, 2021, I think it's not going to get to that point. So I think that a plan here will take you through into the early midterm, and then we can see what the world looks like then. They still care about the rates, and we'll spend a lot of time on it because they want to make sure the rates work for them on the T&D side, the delivery side. That's where they make their money. They've got to, and they've got to do that. It's all public
the rates
process.
are based on how much electricity they deliver. The grid pricing is based on.
So you'll quickly get into where the limits of my knowledge on rate setting, because I was on the demand side management side. So I just don't think I hear that potential challenge in the future. I don't think we're getting there yet.
But I mean, so just a clarifying question: if I now have my next bill is going to have SVCE charge and it's going to have a PG&E charge. Does that PG&E charge vary depending on how much electricity is delivered to my home?
Yeah. All the tiering is done on the T&D side.
So, first thing, if I can sort of think about this correctly, is, correct me if I'm wrong, PG&E is still all of Northern California almost with regard to distribution.
Bakersfield up.
Except for municipal utilities.
Right.
And DA. Their distribution for DA as well, right? So they still got all of Northern California. They're still charging based on how much electricity you're using. Presumably even on the grid side they might charge based on time of use. I don't know. Maybe not. But in any case, there's a lot of money. The other thing is, even if, let's say, we get to 2022 or something, and half the load is departed, half the load in all of Northern California is still a hell of a lot of electricity, right? It's like, it's many times what we
is
are.
not going to go out of business anytime soon.
So, I mean, they're still going to be the largest electricity supplier, single electricity supplier in Northern California for a long time to come.
70% of all the money that they collect from their customers is going to stay in their pocket. Right now, by their own calculations, about 29% go in the CCA service territory goes to the CCA, 12% end up going into the PCIA, and another 3% end up going to the other stuff that they have. Then between the public benefits and distribution, that covers the rest of it. There's considerable amount of business that they can still be doing in Northern California, even if all the generation is taken away.
But realistically, in the next 5 years, maybe only half of it will get taken away.
Yeah, probably less than that.
Okay, so how do we wrap up number one?
Oh, excuse me.
Well,
More public comment?
Okay, go ahead, Bruce.
Thanks. For the record, Bruce Carney. So I've had a couple experiences in my life of the variable annual rebate. One was when I was an HP employee. We would get variable profit sharing twice a year, and that made us all happy. And as a customer of a particular auto insurance company, when there's low claims, we get a check some years, and other years we don't. And I realize that these are ways that an organization can endear itself to its customers. But I have several concerns. So first of all, most of the electricity goes to industrial customers, where there isn't that kind of, I got a check experience. Second of all, when the first presentation on CCA was given to the cities of Santa Clara County, and I believe Margaret and I are the only two people who were at that meeting, a lot of what got the cities excited was the fact that there would be a flow of funds that could be directed toward climate change mitigation activities. And I would be very sad if there was a decision to flow a great deal of money that was collected by SVCE back to customers in small dribs and drabs that could collectively be used for important climate change related activities. So I don't think that it would be my personal desire to see rebates. Another thing I would say as a former marketing professional is that y'all don't have that many degrees of difference between yourself and any other electricity supplier. You do have price, and you do have the greenness of your product. And there's a lot of focus on competing with PG&E on price, but in fact PG&E has come roaring up out of the back of the pack on greenness and has passed some CCAs and could very well within the next 2 years pass just about every other CCA. They could in fact make a strategic shift and say they want to be the all greenhouse gas free supplier. So I would definitely, it would be cool, but I definitely would not want to give away the control of price by saying we're going to mirror PG&E, particularly given that they often raise their rates exorbitantly and piss their customers off. You don't want to be tied to that. So I think rate setting should be done thoughtfully. It should be done in the context of what is PG&E charging, but it shouldn't be formulaic. And let's see, was there one more point to go? We mentioned that there's 3 to 5 rate increases a year. That's a lot of changes that take place. Sometimes they're decreases. Mostly they're increases. I do think that there's a lot of opportunity to send better price signals about the cost of electricity at different times of the day. Now, maybe that data isn't available right now, but I think it would be terrific to do what was mentioned at the on-bank, where some Texas utilities offer free nights and weekends for electricity because they have so much wind power at night that that's what they're willing to do to their customers in order to charge more during the non-night, non-weekend time. So that kind of flexibility with a marketing wrapper around it could be, a very interesting way to create a preference for SVCE to the extent that that's really necessary, frankly, because once you get past the introductory period, I would say 98% of the customers won't notice, won't care, won't switch. So do what's right for the climate first and what you think is right for the organization second.
Sorry, go ahead, Margaret. She hasn't spoken much yet.
Thank you. Just in relation to what Bruce said, one does include the rebates and the programs, doesn't it? So we're going to do all that, and then at the end, if there's still some money left,
let me
return it.
just be very clear that we are not trying to do this to the exclusion of doing programs that will continue to promote reduction of greenhouse gas. what the idea would be that in the beginning of the year, in August, we're going to be coming to you with a budget proposal, and that budget proposal will include programs, ideas, rebates, ways to spend money on getting people to do what's necessary to do additional reduction in greenhouse gas. And we will go for the operating year doing that. And also, in the budget year, we'll have a 100% carbon-free set of resources being proposed to you with all the expenses that goes with that. Then at the end of the year, there will be money left over, whether money that we collected that we didn't spend, or money that we said we can allocate it to programs and we couldn't spend it fast enough because people are not, responding, which would cause us to want to deviate and do different programs to get people more attracted to them. Bottom line is there would be money left over, and what we're recommending is that we turn around and give this money back to the customers, saying this is your dividends, this is what you get for investing in us. Doesn't mean that we are doing this to the exclusion of doing programs and doing what's necessary for the entire year.
This is what's left after all of our costs and all of our programs.
After you're done with the entire year, after you've done everything that you need to do, and now you have money left over, you're going to give it back. There was another point that, and it's definitely a good one that Bruce is bringing up, which is, industrial customers getting a check for $200,000. They're not going to be that great. So we thought about that actually, and we thought maybe for the large customers, more specifically for the 100, the top 50 customers that we know are out there paying a lot of money to us, maybe we can have that rebate be done on a quarterly basis or done by. So that is something that we also need to be thinking about. Another thing that I would like to toss out here for you to think about is for 2017 and 2018. We are set at 1%. We're not going to change that. And we said we're going to sweep all the money that's left over and put it in reserves. And I'm thinking, would it be a good idea to take some of that, small portion of it? Yeah, let's say, for example, 10 or 20% of that, and give that as dividends back to kind of introduce the idea to the customer for the first year. Yes.
For me, it's saying we should figure out what we want to make sure it's covered for the year, and then talk about what's left. Like getting out of debt seemed like a big goal, and if we could get out of debt in 2017 and then still have some left over.
We're looking at the so far the performer says that we're going to be ended up before we pay off the $3 million that we owe. We'll end up with about $33 million.
So there's going to be money left over, even if we extinguished all of our debt this
for the calendar year.
Yeah. So when you start talking,
so we probably a little less than $30 million because you pay off everybody and you pay off the interest on this, that, and the other things. So we're probably in the $25 to $30 million.
And then I don't know what programs, what reserves money we need to save. But I think we'd work that way, and then there'd be some number that's left, and then we could say, do we want to do it,
And okay, we'll talk about the reserves that's listed on the agenda.
Margaret, you finished?
I think this is a great idea. It really comes down to what we end up with at the end, and so as a goal, I think this is fine. But maybe with that, the flexibility of we have to review it at the end of the year, and I mean that's great if it's $30 million. But if something happens, and if it was like $500,000, it might make sense to just put it in a grant fund instead. So I would just like to have that kind of flexibility based on what kind of numbers we're really looking at.
We can just set the policy as is
goal
recommended right now. Then later on, when we get to the end of the calendar year, we can come back to you and say, look, this is how much money we got left. Do you want to give a small portion of it back, or do you want to just sweep it all into reserves for now and talk about 2018?
Liz, you've been waiting quite a while.
So I'm going to try and bring it to conclusion, I think, in what you're asking. So what I understand is there are three options before us. One is giving some type of a modest discount plus a rebate. The second one is setting our own rates, and then the third one is using PG&E rates. That's basically what you've presented to us.
Yeah, third one is basically doing away with the 1 to 3%.
Doing away with the 1 to 3, okay. And the discussion seems to be going towards the discount plus a rebate. And then, so there's been some discussion on an initial year rebate. I think that's a great idea if we could pull it off. Myself.
Initial year being
This coming year.
2017.
At the
It would
end of
be
this year.
At the end of this year.
meaning
That's what he's saying.
this November.
This November, yeah.
And we can examine that, as we get closer to the end of the year. We certainly can we can look at, because we absolutely have to pay what we borrowed.
Right.
Yeah, from the cities. You guys are generous. You can wait. You're going to wait 3 more years if we have to, but we'll try to pay it off.
You know that
This
Mountain
year.
View, Sunnyvale, and Cupertino put a hell of a lot of capital in.
And staff time.
Well, I want to
Yeah.
stick it to the guy on my council said he doesn't believe in global
That'd be
warming.
dope.
He doesn't want to spend
Yeah, you
$100,000.
ought to do that.
I want to stick that one right back where it
I
belongs.
think
want
we
you to
show
show
up.
up.
I think we should all have that.
With a physical check. a
Yeah,
big one.
yeah, it would be, the big one, it would be good. So, assuming that the analysis plays out the way you're anticipating, we have.
As we get closer to the end of the year,
right.
we'll come back to you.
There's some positive feedback that would be a great thing to do. On the rebate disparity between the big and the small, and the big being our largest, consumer utilization, fewer numbers but higher utilization, you're suggesting that we still give them the same percentage of rebate, but for cash flow purposes, we give it out quarterly.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not going to cut them back. They're just going to get the same benefit as everybody else. One for all and all for one.
Exactly. It'll be the same percent that everybody would get.
Okay. So I think some of the things Bruce brought up were helpful to paralleling some of mine. So if we take this discount plus, you're recommending, question, following PG&E even if it goes up and down?
Yes.
Or are we saying set the rate at the beginning of the year, just say
Yes,
3%, we hold it, and then if PG&E goes up and down, so be it, but we've got enough delta, ideally with 3% thinking, to cover any ups and downs?
Yes.
Okay, so I got that one right. How does the time of demand,
Me and time of use.
time of use, thank you. How does the time of use influence this? Not for this year, but for next year when it goes into effect, right?
The 2019 is when it goes into a default time of use.
Default.
Basically, all the customers of the investor-owned utilities will default into a time of use. They can, I believe, get out of it and go back to normal rates. But the default, kind of like how customers got defaulted into our service, that's going to happen for all the investor-owned utilities.
Okay, so my question is, it may not influence what we're talking about for 17 and 18 then. Is there anything that we're doing 17 and 18 that needs to prepare for that coming in 19 that I'm a little confused on?
Yeah, 2019 we can do exactly what PG&E
We can do
planning
the
to
same
do, which is
thing.
we can default all of our customers into time of use and give them the opportunity to back out if they want to. But they can have exactly what PG&E customers have. At the end of the day, even with time of use is in place, you can still do the 1 to 3% below
Okay.
PG&E based on.
And they can still opt into another program. So
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So thank you for that. I've got another note here that says benefits. I'm not sure I remember what that is. The other question I have is solar. Now, am I understanding correctly that? Well, there's an aside point that solar doesn't count with our load, so I'm a little confused about encouraging people to put solar, i.e. me, when I put my new roof on. Should we be putting solar on our roofs? I'm a little confused about that. And did I hear you say that solar would not participate in the rebate because it's illogical?
No, my statement was if I'm a net producer for the year,
Yeah.
I would be illogical. Most solar customers are not net producers. They still have an electric bill. all of a sudden small amount.
Okay, so they would still get a
I think
percentage.
you should pay us.
Okay, so thank you for the
Everybody gets a
clarification.
percentage relative to the amount of money that they put in. Whatever you put in, you get a percent
I think mine seems secure.
rebate or a percent dividend to go with that.
Okay, good. And then I'm trying to understand two things. The state, PG&E may well be catching up with us. That's actually, I thought, a very, very important comment. So as we do our rate structure, I think we have to be sensitive to being competitive with, meaning lower than PG&E. Doing the rebate at the end of the year, particularly if it's a month's bill, I think is a great thing, because it would not give PG&E marketing clout when they come back and say, we've exceeded the state mandate as well. You don't want them to have a back door in.
Quick comment, that especially on that the reason PG&E is doing more than what's
Yeah.
required is because they're losing load.
Right.
So the
Right.
denominator is getting smaller,
Right.
and therefore they now look a little bit better on the green side. The other point, which is, as far as I'm concerned, is more important. For them to brag about this,
Yeah.
it's costing us a lot of money because that's PCIA cost. They went out and committed to these supposedly green resources are now causing all kind of issues to the grid at exuberant prices for which we are paying now the
Because we
difference.
have to, because they can pay whatever they want to pay because they get the money back without challenge.
Exactly.
We're trying to be cost competitive, and now we're fighting against their open
Exactly.
market.
So I do not want to be compared with PG&E ever on
So
what we are doing.
that's what I need to hear, because that's what I don't want either. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think we should, and I think we should point out continuously to the fact that their practices and their planning is not very prudent, and it's done in a way that just reflects what the state wants, reflects what the CPC wants.
With no
Then later
responsibility.
on, just if they don't collect it from like their customers directly, they collect it from our customers in a
Because of the
PCI
structure.
charge.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that that's really helpful. And then the last question I have is, how does this negative pricing influence what we're talking about?
Oh, you mean on the supply side? It's part of our supply cost.
It's just in there.
Right now, the way we bought our resources, at least for the next few years, and we are very aware of the negative pricing. Matter of fact,
That was a very good article.
Yes, I'm glad you read it. It's
I
really
did.
interesting. I knew at least you would read it, Liz. I was almost positive you'd be the one. The negative pricing for the next couple of years doesn't affect us at all because the way we bought our resources, we locked in the prices for the energy, we locked in the adder for the attributes, and so the prices can go wherever the prices will go, and it doesn't really hurt us. There's one single resource that we bought into, and it's going to start in 2018, and it meets roughly about 5% or less of our needs, of the renewable needs. That may be going into negative prices.
But
It
we
may
bought
not
it
be.
really cheap, right?
We bought it really cheap, and
So it should net out over a year anyway.
it is definitely a whole lot cheaper than what PG&E bought a year ago, and what Apple bought a couple of years ago, and so on. I'm seeing numbers now that are just incredibly low coming in the market. This morning we're just negotiating with somebody to figure out a way to bring in additional solar. That would. I've never seen it that low before, but they are just
giving it away.
Yeah, I mean the average price in the market for solar has just gone really downhill fairly quickly.
Really got to undermine that whole part of the industry because you get to the point where you can't make money building it.
Just read an article this morning. It's really great, and I've left an email for the suppliers the developers that are doing a deal down in Tucson, Arizona, They looking at a combination of both solar and storage. They are coming at less than 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour, which it just
What's their storage medium?
it's a 100 megawatt solar, 30 megawatt storage with 120 megawatt hours. So it's sort of 30 megawatt with 4 hours storage.
Stored thermal or stored
Battery storage.
batteries? Wow.
And
So
it-
when you say 30 megawatts, that means it can dump 30 megawatts at a time into 120
Up to 4 hours.
megawatt hour storage.
yeah, yeah.
And same thing back out, correct? In at the same rate as out.
And the most interesting part of it is just Hawaii worked out a similar deal a couple of years ago, 11 cents a kilowatt hour, or
So we're
11
down to
cents a
4.
kilowatt hour. It's down to 4.5 now. Assuming that what I've read is correct, so I've called the guy to find out where that's at, because I think that would be a pretty decent buy and a commitment to make now before a lot of the tax breaks go away. Yeah.
So just to say, those were all the issues that I heard being raised, trying to be discussed, and I think from my point of view, I'm fine with a discounted rate. I'm inclined to think the 3% is a good bar to hold with a rebate at the end of the year, the first year. I think that would be a real positive gesture to the community, and I'm comfortable that I'm feeling more comfortable that I understand how we relate to PG&E and how we can counter and be independent and perceived as a positive irrespective of PG&E.
I want to throw in one crazy idea. If we're going to be giving big checks back to these corporations, so it may be part of Google's load we do, I can't remember, not of Apple, whatever. There may be some of these organizations that want to do something green. So what if we offer them the option of, instead of getting a check back, putting it into our EV incentive program or some choices to see, if they want to do that, something like that.
Buy electric buses for the VTA.
Because you're worried about giving away these big checks.
Exactly.
What if
Expensive.
it may seem like free money to them that they didn't budget. So
And they can take it as a tax deduction, whatever. I don't know how to do that. But that's a great idea.
In my dreams.
Or building, or I don't know if you want to do this, putting solar on the housing projects that they're supporting. I mean, whatever.
Well, I haven't said whatever.
go ahead, Rod.
I like this. I like, and it seems to me that sitting on the air board, we often budget for grants, and then we really have no idea how many people are going to take advantage of them. Especially for a new agency, we probably are a little clueless about how much money there is. So there's uncertainty, and if we are doing incentive programs and rebates and grants, how much money we would actually consume in a year. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's uncertainty. We have regulatory uncertainty. We have,
PCI uncertainty.
well, that's primarily what I mean by regulatory, right? It's whatever charges get thrown our way, non-bypassable charges, whatever. So it seems to me that by holding a reasonable amount, but not overdoing it, to the end of the year, and then we make some decision, right, on where we are at the end of the fiscal year, and then say, okay, well, actually, we do have this bright idea for this systemic rebate that we'd like to offer, so, but maybe the board makes a conscious decision every year about how much that dividend is, but, in terms of branding and being well appreciated, I'm with you and you and you and you. I mean, I think this idea that, and I think you have to be careful about the language. You have to be really thoughtful. I happen to like the word dividend. I think it's a good word. Shareholder is a little, because we don't really want to compare ourselves in that particular way to PG&E, I don't think. We are not a shareholder-owned company. We are a community-owned company, and I think we can differentiate. But to me, right, the word that you chose, dividend, is a good word. I think, that amount, the only thing I'd want to do, right, is make sure that whatever amount we're bringing back in a rebate is defensible. So when we get the Krabbies in the world, we can say, look, we're a new entity. Like any startup, there are a lot of uncertainties, and so we didn't know how many people would take the rebate. We didn't know what else would be coming from the CPUC, so that's why, right? We are withholding some, but we're trying to be conservative as an agency. But at the end of the day, right, this is your money, not ours, and so we want to make. So I think that's great. I also like your idea about. Okay, so we were laughing at this end of the table about whether Apple would ever
Get back there.
But maybe.
No freaking way in hell. It's against their whole corporate philosophy.
I know, but listen.
Park it overseas.
I think.
No, I mean, they'll take the money, and if they're going to give it, they'll give it.
I think it would be really cool if we took that idea, we offered it, and then let's say the first year we have, maybe it's only 5 medium-sized businesses. They're not DA customers or anything. We have an award night for them.
Yep. Yep.
And the board shows up, and the public shows up, and we recognize them for,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely
Right?
brilliant.
And so it's a branding opportunity, it's an awards thing. They get to go and show how green they are. We get to kiss them and,
You get to kiss him soon.
whatever.
I can ask my staff to do that.
It's just a kiss and babies.
I don't know. I mean,
One quick follow-up. 8 years ago, when I worked at Solar City, we did some investigation into the tax laws relating to utility programs and rebates. And there's a class of utility programs that is not taxable when you flow money to a customer, whereas a dividend from PG&E would, of course, be taxable income to the recipient. So you might want to get your lawyer to look at how to make it
Getting
non-taxable.
better and better.
It's a rebate. Your REI dividend check is not taxable, so you have to figure out the right.
It actually probably is. Believe me, you need a tax lawyer, but a lot of stuff is taxable that most people don't believe is taxable.
yes, I think doing whatever we could do, right?
Yeah, we should make sure these are not taxable events.
Yeah.
It'll look really bad for us elected officials if we're
Brilliant.
fostering taxable.
Well, we know, right? When I pay an expense, if I'm running a business, that reduces my profits, right? So I get a tax break for paying my electricity bill. In this case, yeah, if you could bring more than the negative benefit associated with the check, that'd be cool. Because it was tax consequential.
That's your rate reduction.
Or it's a contribution, right? It could be even multiplied. That would be.
Does that mean my solar money back is taxable? Probably. Thanks, Bruce.
He's a marketing guy.
I think if you look at,
I was happy.
if you're not getting a tax break for paying electricity, then obviously it is not. And I would assume the same thing would be the case for the large customers. If you give them a rebate in a reduction of their tax, their electricity bill, then maybe indirectly it will be a taxable bill because it just increases the bottom line, their profit, and their electricity is tax deductible, I assume, because it's business expense.
Right.
So if that is reduced,
Then it would be taxable.
yeah, it would be taxable.
I'm just thinking individuals too.
So we should probably wrap this up and move on to number 2.
I'm super happy with how she wanted
Good discussion. Good discussion.
The other thing I should just point out, everybody probably gets this, right? We're 2017. This landscape is going to be evolving so dramatically. I think this discussion we need sort of every year. How are we doing? Are we adjusting course? Are we guiding course? And then there's a big, huge dislocation when PG&E shuts down Diablo Canyon in 7 years. 22% of their power, which by that point seemed like 40% of their power. And they said they're replacing that with all renewables, which the way they're doing that is through us.
Yeah.
So,
It's so hard to explain. But I was going to say also, I
We'll be
liked
doing this every year.
I liked the way this report came out for different purposes, but this is a nice way of reviewing what our policies are, what policies have been brought to conclusion, and what needs to be revisited. It was very, very easy, and oh yeah, we did do that.
Can I ask staff for one small thing for the R schedule, for the residential schedule, the R1, I guess it is? Can we get a graph? That I had not realized how much PG&E is changing their rates, but it shows us at the 1%, and we're staying 1% in PG&E. So every time they change, can we just add to the graph?
It would be good to know where we sit.
Yeah,
in
so
real
that
time.
so that we could use it as a communication.
Even though we don't change our rates.
So we're constant 1%. PG&E is 1% higher than us, so they're the red line, we're the green line. And then every time they change their rates, they go 3 months at 1%, then they move themselves up, and then move themselves down. So we can see.
Bruce, may I share that table you gave me?
Sure. So that we can see at any point in time, and we just run it, so it'll go for a couple of years. Then when customers say, oh, where are you relative to PG&E? I'll say, well, not only were we less, we stayed less, and we were constant for you for the year. And I think from that ever-changing PG&E graph.
I guess the problem is there are a zillion rate schedules, right? So
That's why I said just
have
the
to do something
residential.
blended. Oh, I see.
Just the residential one.
Well, even with residential, there's many schedules, many rates.
Maybe there's some blended. There's prototypical one.
It's the main one.
Yes.
It's just the
R1,
standard.
right? E1, I'm sorry. Yeah, the E1 seemed like a logical one to do. And I get it all the time when I talk to the citizens. They're like, so you say you're one.
However, we should move on. We still got three to go here.
Yep. Trying to get my direction.
The second issue is the power supply mix, and we talked about that extensively. Initially, we went with 25 type 1, 25 type 2, and 50% large hydro. And we now talked a number of times about how type 2 is becoming scarce, not because something new happened in the market, but because most of the ones that own anything that's renewable manage to figure out a way to turn all the renewable into a type 1, and very rarely now that you have a pure type 2. Matter of fact, any type 2 that's being sold in the market today is really a type 1 that couldn't find a home, and so people are just saying, fine, take it as type 2, but boy, just give me something that would be closer to the premium that I was expecting to get from the marketplace. My recommendation is, and that is going to require a change in the way we market our products, which we're going to talk about next, is to get all what we are required to do, RPS, that we're required to do by the state, which this year I believe is 27%, going to 29 next year to 31 the year after. By 2020 it's 33%, then it moves at 1.7% from that point all the way to 50% by the year 2030. That we get that amount all met by type 1 and not try to deal with the headaches that the state offers 75% of this, 10% of that, and another 15% of this or that or the other thing. Just do away with all that and just meet everything that we are required to do. RPS, that is, by type 1, then remainder to do it with large hydro, staying away from type 2, which in my mind no longer exists realistically, and also type 3, which until we get people to kind of start to see things on a regional basis, where we continue to get a lot of resistance to type 3, unbundled RPS, REX. So if we stay away from that too and just focus on large hydro, a combination of the two should be still getting us to 100% carbon free. So that's accompanied by or coupled by change our product offering is what I'm recommending that we use in 2019 and beyond.
So you, at that point, you would be saying we're 30% renewable. And that
Would be
just
30% eligible renewable.
30,
Just to
but
be
there must
more.
be 30. Mom would hear 30% renewable, and that sounds less than 50% renewable, which sounds
I'm trying very hard to get not just you folks but my staff as well to get away from this word renewable because it's becoming incredibly confusing.
I hate the word renewable personally.
Yeah.
I only talk about the greenhouse gas part of it, but I'm just trying to clarify what you said. If we marketed it in our exact same terms, it would be 130 instead of 150.
Yes, but we're not going to market it that way.
No, I mean that's what it would be.
It is a word now that not only I don't believe need to exist, but I'm seeing enough signs at the CPUC level, whether at the staff level or even the president of the CPUC and a number of other people in the close in this industry that just trying to get away from this word because it is becoming a lot more confusing.
Maybe they're trying.
Yeah, and they're trying to focus a lot more on decarbonization, free, neutral. The focus need to shift away from increase the number of renewables in the system to finding what is necessary in order to decarbonize the system. And that takes not just the electric resources into account, but brings in transportation and anything that you can do in the building. It's a mind shift, and it resolves a problem that we now know that we suffer from, which is the duck curve and all the problems associated with them.
So basically what you're saying is until lawmakers get around to revising the RPS, we should just drop that from our vocabulary.
The word renewable specifically, yeah, and still meet. We're still going to meet all the what we're required to do by type 1, so we actually go beyond what they're asking us to do. But we are just focusing a lot more on the decarbonization of our resources.
Liz?
So I respect what you have to say. It's confusing to me that we want to get rid of the word renewable because in my profession, that's all that you were talking about. I'm fine being re-educated and changing. We do need to be thoughtful about building codes and state regulations because they're tough for professionals like me, architects and engineers to deal with. So we don't want to confuse people about that. The other thing is, I don't know if any of you remember when this conversation first came up. I know Tom does with Supervisor Simidian. He was heavily involved in the state legislation. I don't want to cause a problem where we don't have one, but is it useful for Tom or staff to talk with Simidian and make sure he's on board with this? Because he was not happy that we went 100% greenhouse gas free, as I recall the conversation. He was really onto the renewable bandwagon.
I do remember the talk, and one of the things that, and I've talked to him afterwards. We got together for lunch and talked afterwards, and he kind of cleared a few things for me. Why he was kind of pushing the way he was pushing. But I can tell you right now, I've lived it, and I know exactly why they excluded hydro resources from the mix when they were putting the law together. It was abundantly obvious that Southern California will not come along. Southern California, Edison specifically, will not come along to play that game if large hydro stayed in as a renewable resource. Because in their view is they had 3% of their load being made by large hydro. PG&E had 20%. PG&E would have been already at the 20% that they would have been required to do back in 2002 by the year 2010. So Southern California said, I'm going to have to increase my rates significantly in order to reach that point because I don't have any large hydro, and unless large hydro is pushed out, then Southern California was not going to come along, and the only reason they accepted large hydro is to keep Southern California in play.
So that's helpful to understand. Again, confusing but understandable, sort of. So I only offer this is that in terms of the county and the support that we've gotten and the overall commitment, this organization and the setup of it. Supervisors were a major aspect of that. The supervisor's opinion was a key person in that. So just make sure, I would suggest that staff and the board consider making sure that we have good communications with all the supervisors. And I know we have Supervisor Cortese on the board now.
Any other comments? Shall I go to public comment? Anybody from public like to speak? Bruce?
So I just checked in with James as to what was PG&E's latest announced percent of renewable, and so for 2015, we believe it was 30%, up from 27% in 2014. So we can imagine that rate that last year, which hasn't published yet, it was 33, and this year it'll be 36. It's linear extrapolation. Now, San Jose says that they want to have one offering that's 10% more renewable than PG&E. So San Jose is saying it would want to be at 46 if it were in operation today. I find it hard to think that we're going to back down below those kinds of numbers. And in fact, if the only barrier to being 50% renewable still is spending some money, then I would rather spend the money rather than rebate it as a dividend. I do recall seeing that there's a talk of trying to reposition the Green Prime as a made in California green energy, which I think is a good idea because I agree that it's hard to differentiate our two green products, and that made in California would be a very good attribute if we could add that in. And as you all know, there's the issue in the environmental community of additionality for CCAs. So what new resource, whether it's renewable or carbon-free, exists because we exist? And the answer today is none. But we hope that the answer in the future will be all sorts of things, like the Arizona solar plus storage at $45 a megawatt hour. That sounds like a wonderful product. And if storage is really becoming that affordable, it's going to be an answer to a lot of the challenges that we face. So I understand the constraints, but my bias is to say renewability is still an attribute that matters, and 30% of it's not enough.
James?
In the community outreach events I've participated in, I consistently have difficulty trying to help people understand what renewable means. And carbon-free is much more clear. That's what people are starting to come to understand relative to the climate crisis. So I think staff proposal fits with where we're going, and I think just repositioning toward focusing on decarbonization rather than renewable makes sense to me, even if it is backing off a certain percentage of renewables.
Okay. Any other comments?
I hate the word renewable. I watched the Apple campus, 100% renewable, 4 megawatt base load is carbon based, and it's only 3% less carbon per megawatt than the natural gas fired plant stood up 20 years ago down in San Jose. I mean,
Blue boxes?
they're not really helping. Yeah, they're not really helping. I know they are helping in a way, but their message is all about renewable, which is a political definition. I hate politicians. And so burning garbage in Stanislaus County is renewable.
Why it is.
Right? You know, sorry. You know, I really have a difficult time with the renewable thing, and I always have, and that's why I've always focused on the carbon, and I think that's a big part of the story. But which is left, but Margaret would say, you know, perception is reality, and if it looks like we're backpedaling on renewable, and a lot of the messaging in the Valley is about renewable, our customers are going to say, wait a minute, you're less green than you were last year because now our number for renewable is less. That's the part where I have all the problems.
I think that this focus on perception is gotten us to, if you had a chance to read this article that I've sent you, to have the 31% of all the 5-minute intervals on daily basis that happen between January 1st and the end of March, first quarter of 2017, to be to have the energy be sold to the ISO at negative prices. So we can just keep digging into the hole, hoping to come out of it one of those days, and I just don't see a way out of that hole. I'm just talking about additionality and adding more solar, local solar, and the rest of the stuff.
Give me storage. Give me storage.
I'd like people just to focus a little bit more on the things that eventually will cause less of carbon to be spewed in the atmosphere. And I think all that additional solar, without regard to adding storage and without regard to what's happening in the system, is doing exactly that.
And I tend to, I was going to say pretty much the same thing. I'm worried about us digging into a hole, and sticking to the renewable term just keeps digging us down that hole. People want more solar. One of the solutions is more hydro, because you can run it at nighttime. So it gets us to that everybody can do carbon-free all day solution. If we just stick with the renewable, we aren't going to, it's just going to get worse. I can't see technically how we're going to solve this without a lot of storage, which is going to take a long time to come online. So I kind of like the idea. Anyway, Rod?
Yeah, I agree. I think we have an opportunity to be leaders, and we can tell the legislators who define the RPS that they need to revise it, but in the end they own the definition. And so I think in our marketing and messaging, our big environmental benefit should be because we're mitigating climate change in every possible way, right? And so renewable doesn't do that, right? Renewable is a thing that, in a sense, perhaps more and more solar. We can't get any. It's hard to get any more wind here because of concern about birds, and so I'm okay with branding. The premium option being California generated. Yeah. So I haven't heard anything compelling to suggest that renewable is the horse that we should ride on. I think we started strong, and I would continue to optimize around carbon-free, and hopefully the state at some point will catch up, because they'll have to.
I just wish we hadn't gone out of the gate now 50% renewable.
Lessons learned.
Well, I don't think it's.
The message that can be.
What's wrong with the message of 50% renewable?
No, it's not that message. It's when we say in 2019.
Oh, that we even said anything about it.
Yeah, we're 30% renewable.
We can.
I have yet to have anybody tell me
renewable and just pack it with Type 3, but I know
I have yet to have anybody tell me that the always-on electricity that we're getting from big hydro, that's a mistake.
But
right?
again, it's
Nobody's saying it's a mistake. People are saying, maybe you have a reason to say it's a mistake, but you need an always-on source of electricity, and you'd like it to come ideally from California, but if it doesn't, so it's on the grid. And what's wrong with that exactly? And why should we be, doing a policy that pushes us away from it?
I would just summarize by saying I don't disagree that what Tom in this discussion is saying to get away from renewable. The issue is perception. And do we want to get stuck educating the public on the new definition or lack of viability of the term renewable?
No.
That we have to be careful about.
I would just, you focus your marketing on carbon free.
But other people, remember others, PG&E will be pushing renewable.
Let them until the cows come home.
We can't be naive about it.
But we can't come up short.
People are going to get, unless they're really educated themselves, what they're going to get is if PG&E keeps on with renewable, this guy says renewable, that girl says renewable, renewable, fine, and we come along with carbon free, in the mind of an ordinary member of the public, do they even get that there's a distinction?
Yeah, they're going to think we're 100%. So you're right. You're right.
So, I mean, yes, we have to measure ourselves on renewable. We have to know how much we have. But, I mean, in terms of the marketing we do,
I sort of have a question in my mind a little bit. We have one offering that's 100% California carbon free. Not that many people are moving up to the green prime. So most people are going to be the 100% carbon free versus the 100% California carbon free. Does that make our regular, most people offering look bad if they know that they're in the not 100% California carbon free? That was my first reaction when I read that was.
Well, it's carbon free. Both of them are carbon free. So if that's what you care about, then you're fine. But if you're a California centric and then want to do things for your state and willing to pay a little extra for it, then that's fine too. I don't see anybody feeling bad about being 100% carbon free, regardless of whether they get it from California or from elsewhere.
You could throw the word renewable back in there. Carbon-free California renewable.
No, because we still have.
I know.
Well, those people that have opted up to Green Prime were expecting to get 100% renewable. Now we're actually not offering them 100% renewable, right?
Because we're trying to get away from the word renewable altogether. I mean, I if I can help it, really marketing has to follow content. We have to agree.
I agree. I'm just
what's the right
thinking
thing to do. Then let marketing figure out how to sell that, and that's the approach that we need to do, not the other way around. Right now, we sometimes I feel like this is what we're marketing, and therefore you need to make sure that the content matches that. And I don't think that's the right way to go. I think we had to fix the content, make sure it's the right thing, then we'll get the marketing to take care of it, and we'll get perceptions to follow eventually.
well, those people that have signed up for Green Prime, we need to now tell them, hey, we're changing it on you. Would you like to go back to the other?
And we have a year and a half to do that.
Well,
Yes.
you certainly
Yeah, I
don't want
agree.
this to come out in the press in June when we're switching everybody in July.
No.
Silicon Valley Clean
This
Energy
is
request
going to
is
be
on.
a program that we have to over the next year and a half.
It's got a lot of unintended consequences.
Over the next
I think
year and a half,
I
we'll
think we
design the program appropriately. Then it will take months for us to do that. Then eventually we'll come back to you with here's how the 2019. This is what the offers will be. This is what the price associated with each offer. Because I don't anticipate that the Green Prime price will match California carbon free. I don't know if that's going to be the case. We have to go back and recalculate and find out what the appropriate premium is. Maybe lower, maybe higher. I don't know.
So after we get everybody enrolled and they're settled a month or two later, there won't be that many people to mail to. Can we mail to the Green Prime people and survey them? Or maybe it's not 2 months, maybe it's 6 months, whatever the right amount is. But get some idea of whether this even makes sense, because we're stuck on the California thing because of some people at the state level. The average person may say, I don't give a rat's butt about California
There was some
carbon
reason
free,
they-
and nobody's going to pick it now.
There was some reason they opted out, and it would probably be good to.
Well, I told
understand,
everybody
right?
with solar in my city they needed to opt out.
So-
Right? I mean, some messaging went around it, which had nothing to do with the actual attributes. It just had to do with the economics.
But I mean, we can take some leadership position by talking to the legislature and saying, here's why we made this choice. Our prime virtue is carbon free, and there are some deficiencies in just continuing to push renewables as they're currently defined. We think you ought to be helping shape energy policy in the state by, considering modifying the definition. Maybe a year and a half from now, we won't have to have this.
There has been, at least since May, when we had the first
You're responsible,
CPUC
right?
unbond to the second one that we just had last week, there's been clear movement on the part of a lot of people. A lot of people hardly mentioned the word renewable in that last bond, but they were focusing a lot more on carbon free. There's definitely been a resignation among the CPUC and investment-owned utilities that we're not going to be pushed away. The CCAs are here to stay, and so now they recognize that, and they all seem to be comfortable with it, and they're going to figure out a way to make it. Well, not but at least they can live with it.
Who is comfortable with
The CPUC as well as the investment-owned utilities. They simply have not got to the point now where at least figuring that there's a way to kill it. They realize that you're just not going to do that. With 8 operating CCAs and another 4 scheduled for next year.
Or if you are going to do it, you're going to do it with something big and systemic.
But Kevin DeLeon's bill says 100%, renewable or greenhouse gas or carbon-free by 2040, I think is the number. But he's got some other stuff in there that's like 60% renewable by 2030 or whatever the dates are in there. So he's still, that bill that's coming has got a bunch of renewable language in it.
The day that thing wasn't even published on the register yet. I actually sent him and his staff mail saying, look, it's really the carbon side. And that other sentence seemed like it got jammed in there, but they didn't change the rest of it. But I think they have to move as a legislature, and labor has latched onto the renewable thing as a way to bring high-paying jobs to California. The definition still works, and it will still work with labor, but I think they're going to actually have to think about it. Storage should count, and a lot of hydro can be turned into storage. There's a lot of big public works projects there. Batteries, high-tech. There's a lot of opportunity that would bring, quote, high-paying jobs to the state of California, or battery facility in Nevada.
And complement more solar, right?
And it would complement solar. It would also complement wind. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for grid stability. If you have cheap, effective, highly flexible in terms of availability storage, it would benefit a lot of people.
Yeah.
We're really into item number 3. Did you want to say anything else about item number 3?
Back on item number 2, just because I have a little devil and a little angel on both sides, and I apologize to everybody for speaking out of both sides of my mouth. The engineering me agrees 100% with you, Tom. We should do what's right to figure out how to market it. The perception part and how we market it is a big concern because I think it could turn out to be a black eye if it's not managed correctly. So maybe that's an appropriate way to do it.
I concur with that.
I got that best marketing team.
Ooh, be careful.
Okay.
Actually, just before we actually leave, back to item number 1, if you don't mind, I do want to, for the record, give the credit for the dividend idea to John Supp, who's not here, and to the keeping the 1 to 3% or some sort of a discount from PG&E's number. And personally, I wanted to match it, but Andrea, as well as Kevin Miller, who's one of our new students, both of them actually talked me into keeping the discount going. So I want to give the credit to them as well.
Wonderful.
Okay, so we're on number 3 then.
Yes.
Kind of been on number 3 for a while, but what else would you like to fill in?
There's one product that we still kind of leaving open, and that would be more specific to our large customers. We would like to just to keep the opportunity out there for large customers to come in and say, I want something, a different combination of resources, a different product than what you're offering that will allow me to get Green certificate for the mix of resources that you are selling me. So we want to think this one over. We want to talk to our large customers and see what other products aside from these 2 that we just listed would they like to see, and then have that be more of a targeted product instead of just a product available for all, but it would be targeted more for large customers.
Meeting the market demand, I guess that would be reasonable.
Yes.
And so there are some big companies that have a specific RPS, do you?
Yeah, for example, when we sat down with one of our large customers, I'm not going to mention the name, they asked that will we be getting a Green certificate? And I said, no, I just don't have the time or the energy or the inclination to try to. I already got Regis and CEC and PUC and everybody in the motherhood looking over my shoulder. So the question actually from them was, if I were to buy a certain product from you, where do you certify it? You know, Greenie certifies it, but the renewable,
self-certified.
but the renewable has to be like 10 years or younger age-wise, and there are certain things that have to be done just to kind of give a self-certification. So to the extent that the customers, we have a number of customers on the large side are willing to pay a little extra so we can get these certifications, which they like and they tend to wear, and it benefits them. That's fine. We can work that out to the extent that we can work out a deal with them that will get them to pay for a portion of, if not all, of the cost of the additional certification that will be required.
Just like a certification fee.
Exactly.
I don't know if it applies to this group, but we do, on council, have to have a schedule of fees. If we do authorize the collection of fees, we have to have a schedule of fees. Just
Okay. We'll keep it in mind.
Public comment on number 3? Nothing? Okay. Any other comments?
We always go for cost recovery on these things, right?
Yes.
So if somebody wants customization that we don't generally offer, they want,
Yeah.
we'll give them a fee for a service, but the fee has to be based on full burden cost. of
Yeah.
staff.
The rate itself will incorporate in it
Or
anything
consultancy
that's
that we would
required.
hire, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm just looking at paperwork.
Are we ready to move on to number
Just
4?
looking at paperwork.
So number 4, Tom?
Number 4 is reserve policy, and as if you do remember, initially we said we're going to set 5% aside for reserves to pay off the cities, and the rest would go into rate stabilization fund, and that's before things looked much better in the following months, and now we are looking at for 2017 of almost 30%. Net operating expenses, net operating revenue, and so we suggested to sweep everything in 2017, 2018, the surplus, we sweep it into rate stabilization fund, and then 2019 we'll do rates appropriately. I'm suggesting to go a little bit more into what's the target for that reserve should be like. And I'm suggesting or recommending at this point that the target would be at 50% of operating expenses with a min and a max of 25% to 75%, with the idea being that if you have to spend more than what you collect, you dip into reserves and you pull money out of it up to the point where you start coming close to the 25% level, and that's when you know that you need to raise your rates in order to collect additional funds. And likewise, if you happen to have surplus at the end of the year, you keep adding to that 50% of operating expenses until you rub against the 75%, and that's when you know you need to give some of a rate discount back. So you have an operating target of 50%, reserve target of 50% of operating expenses with a min and a max of 25% and 75%. And that should encompass all the reserves that we need, all in one pot, so to speak.
And then this is on an annual basis, right?
Yeah, annually.
50% of annual.
Yeah, you just look at it annually and you make sure that it's between these two numbers.
So I have 2 questions which are related but not direct. One is sort of the ongoing month-on-month cash flow situation. So I'm assuming there's enough money in this bucket, so we never have to borrow money, right?
He's already, I think, followed a whole bunch of money to Belize. Is that?
That's not for the record.
Turn it off.
Because I know some months in the timing of payments versus whatever, so that my intuitive sense says there's enough money in this reserve that it satisfies all of our cash flow needs.
Yeah, you still want to establish your day-to-day cash flow, and then whatever's left over, we can put in reserves. Absolutely.
And then the second question, and this one will just sound odd, but we have enough money, and I think also intuitively I believe this to be true, there's enough money in this reserve that if we had to shut down, we could shut down.
and I raised, well, my fellow board members are staring at me with
No,
daggers.
no,
But I
you
mean,
asked this before.
just in case we get crushed by the regulatory maneuverings that are going on, we should have enough money in our reserves to shut down the operations, transition everybody back, and not leave somebody holding some back.
Generally, the reserves are calculated in a way different than the way I tossed it over here. We're just starting the operation, that's why I put these numbers in there. But generally, the way you calculate the reserves takes into account the value at risk, for example, from your supply side. It takes into 90 days of working capital. If you already bought a bunch of equipment, if you have assets, then you take into account one of them breaking, for you lose a $5 million transformer or a backup generator, or you take that emergency capital into reserves. So we can actually calculate the reserves to be a lot more to do what you are asking for, which is what would happen if
Again, my word, intuitively, it seems like there's enough to do those things.
there's plenty more.
Plus, I look forward to charging PG&E our PCIA.
Our customers go back. Yeah, that's another topic we're going to be talking about.
So one thing I struggle with a little bit here, you're talking about moving the rates around to fill our reserves, but it's not consistent with this idea that we're trying to stay 3% below PG&E. Wouldn't we just, if we're 3% below PG&E, I guess it could get to the point that we wouldn't have lump sum payments, but it seems that we just give back less lump sum and fill the reserve that way versus breaking from this 3% from PG&E.
That's the idea, assuming that we're going to always be at 10 to 30% below PG&E.
I guess if our reserve drops, then it means we weren't giving lump sums back anyway. So
exactly. That's the whole idea. So if you get to that point, you're not getting.
Then we have to break from that where we tie it, the delta we tie to PG&E anyway. So okay, it makes sense.
I like this idea because the way I approach this is sort of risk reduction, right?
Yes.
It also sets the amount of risk you anticipate, also sets how much you target as a dividend. And you may or may not be able to pay it within a year, but likewise, this for rate stabilization, all these uncertainties seems like pretty wise. And target, I couldn't, if I was a more durable policy is needed to define the proper level of reserves. I appreciate a minimum and a maximum, right, where we take action too. And frankly, I have no better idea than a 50% target, although I'm not sure exactly why.
5 years from now, 10 years
it has
from
to
now.
do, right, but part of it does have to do with the ability to say, look, if we're in a regulatory environment where we're getting punched for a couple of years before we can enact a punch back, then, half a year's reserves is a pretty good way to do that.
But this also sort of implies that our rate stabilization is really targeting stabilization for 1 year, right? It's sort of, what if we say, okay, the market got much more expensive for some reason, something happened, we're now losing money or something, so we're pulling them out of reserves. And we're doing that because we want to keep rates stabilized. But so that says only stabilized for 1 year, because at the end of the year, then we move the rates, so they are not stabilized anymore.
No. Actually, no. The idea would be, let's say we get to the point where we can't give any more dividends or rebates at the end of the year, and we are fairly close to PG&E, that we can't raise the rates anymore above them, and something happens, we spend more than what we expected. We spend $5 million, maybe $10 million over what we expected. Well, fine, we'll dip into the rate stabilization fund, and if that rate stabilization fund is at target, then we would have about somewhere around $90 million in it, because our expected operating expenses is about $180 million a year. So if you dip into it, $10 million, $15 million out of 90, you still have a good 75. You still haven't brought against that 25% min. So you can be fine for 1 year, maybe the following year, even the third year. You keep getting one hit after the other to the point where the 90 now is dropping down to 60, and you know that that's your min. You don't want to be any lower than that. Then that's the time when you say, well, I'm going to push rates up now. If you still add PG&E's rates, then you got problems. If you continuously keep having operating expenses that keep pushing your rates up to PG&E and you can't get away from that, then something in the formula isn't working correctly.
So how do we get above 50% if we're giving extra back-end dividends?
Well, because we have 2017 and 2018 where we're sweeping everything into reserves. And
well, so in the future, are we saying that when you get to 75%, that's when we start giving dividends back? Or
now I'm suggesting that at the end of the year, we'll come to you and say, we have this extra money that we haven't spent, and we're suggesting that we have some of it go into reserves, and some of it will go as dividends, and maybe some of them will be locked into some fund that we're going to build because we want to do this or that or the other program,
Special program.
or special program that we're thinking about. And to the extent that you say yes to it, then we will do exactly that. Give a good part of it as dividends, keep upping the reserves until we get to that point where we say maybe we need to kind of drop the discount from PG&E to 4 or 5%, or to up the dividends from what we are recommending.
When do we make that decision? Is that at the November meeting?
It would be most likely at the October meeting or the November meeting. It depends on
the finance guy hates
It takes about 60 days, let's say, to close the books. Get all the, so yeah, November.
My wife is an accountant, and we've argued for our entire lives why it takes 60 days for the computer to know how much money you have.
Adjustments.
Lots of adjustments. Actually, a lot of it also because what we pay for power, it's up to 55 days after the price of the month, so things up.
So we get price that's reported by the end of the reporting period.
But I was kind of hopeful that we would look to see if it was possible to give a small dividend in 2017. I got some others in the room might have thought that. But it wouldn't be to give everything that we had.
Oh, no.
How much program, how much reserve.
He has to put the whole table together.
when do we know about the PCIA set for next year?
The first early indication will come probably that will be close to reality, or how it will be, comes in November.
Okay. Because I'd like to know that before we decide to go give dividend.
Well, we're going to get the early signs are going to start coming in June or July, so it's going to be very early signs. Then November it solidifies to a lot closer to what it will be. Then at the end of December 31st is when the number is out.
Really gets going up or down.
This is one of the things we're trying to change about the
Well, if they do the PAM, then
You got a bigger problem.
we got rid of you forget the dividends, forget a lot of stuff. Then we got issues. But obviously we're counting on Hillary over here. She's going to make sure that thing is killed.
Does the public want to comment on this item?
No, thank you.
Bruce was so upset he walked out.
Anything else? Shall we close this?
One general question: when does this stuff go to the board? Is this really for our next
For
meeting?
June. It leaves obviously certain questions unanswered that will be answered back in November or August or September time frame, but at least this kind of sets the stage of
Starting the discussion.
So I know we can't discuss it, cannot agendize, but let me throw a suggestion out for a future discussion. I figured out that most of the electric car chargers are owned by the municipalities that they sit in, right?
Yes.
We could come up with a recommendation to send back to our city councils to change now, regardless of rates or anything, ask them to change their time of charging so that during the day people charge cheaper and it's a higher rate as they hit the evening. And again, I'm thinking Dr. Curve all the time. So that could be a discussion we could have whether we wanted to send a recommendation out to town councils to do this.
Actually, I think 90% of mine are private.
Are they? Okay, because I asked in my town, and I guess we set the rates.
We have a huge number. We have a huge number of their private.
I know, because I'm going around charging, and I know, and I can tell because they tell you when in 2 hours the rate's going to double.
Right.
So that's obviously the city putting parking limitations on them. So they're definitely messing with the rates and them.
There are a lot of private companies, by the way. that do this.
We just changed our rates, but I'm not sure. My staff didn't tell me the charge point had a time of use rate. They had a time that you use
They
it,
don't have one.
but not a time of day.
They don't, huh?
They don't have one, but I'm suggesting.
No, but if we got together and went to ChargePort,
Yeah.
that would be an interesting thing. Say, hey, ChargePoint, you need to have an offering that's time of use based.
The problem is their costs will change, but we're asking them to do it anyway.
There's just to be clear, there's a lot of companies out there like ChargePoint and a number of others. They are the ones that own all these chargers, and they are the ones that set the rates for and how long you can have your car parked.
ChargePoint
That's about
provides a service, and our city has ChargePoint chargers,
Exactly.
and then we tell ChargePoint from the menu of options they give us, we want a
That's how
per
I
hour
do it.
rate.
I think that's what we're doing too in most counties.
Yeah, but they don't have an option where I can say, hey, we want you to charge, between 10 and 4 this low rate, and the other hour is a higher rate or nothing.
And the higher rates they do is actually to discourage parking for a longer
Yeah,
time.
that's the way that.
So-
But I'm saying we could go to ChargePoint and say we'd like a time of use overlay offering, so that a city like ours could then go to them and say, hey, you want to get this?
But I just want to
We
make
should
the
have a
point.
whole-
Make the point that all the products will be coming to you, and Alan and his staff are working pretty hard on it to try to bring it to you in July.
Yes,
Right?
we have a lot of products that we can actually in our programs.
We should have a discussion about charging stations in general. It's
Yeah.
a big issue. And
Well,
not an issue, it's an opportunity.
I think there are a lot of opportunities.
This is a long process.
It's a piece of physical structure that could take an advertisement from us. Even a charge point station could probably take an overlay or a decal or something.
The Volta
100%
guys-
carbon free provided by SVCE.
Right, yeah. We looked at the Volta guys in my city. You're looking at them next month. We've already talked to them. And it's a billboard, free power billboard. They get a billboard in exchange for giving customers free level 2 charging.
But there's a lot of things they can actually regulate on these because they're remotely controlled, and this is why they think the future is not just that. I mean, there's on the roadmap is to design a way to have a big managed charging, so they can actually bid into a DR or
Do what?
bid into a DR program, the demand response, or actually sell these kind of services to utilities or to other services. So that's in their thinking. That's how their product thinking in the future. Not just that.
PG&E got permission to install thousands of charging stations.
Yeah, they're like 7,500 for the areas.
What about our chargers?
Yeah, they have a program actually. PG&E is just we're in discussion with them as well. They got from the PUC some $130 million to install about 7,500 chargers in their area, and with some recommendation like 15% to be in disadvantaged areas. And they're basically workplace and multi-unit dwellings.
Any other comments from staff? Comments from committee? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.